I'm Corbett Wall with DB Auction, here with your feeder flash for Thursday, May the 30th, where these backgrounders have really been taking it in the shorts and are feeling the pain. Your backgrounders, the guys that take your calves and take them to a heavier weight, take them to a yearling feeder weight, your middleman in growing cattle. And a lot of the big prices that I quote you are backgrounded cattle, guys that really know how to do it. They take calves. They either try to buy calves that are weaned or they buy unweaned calves and wean them and add value to those cattle by putting larger groups together, giving them all their shots, taking them to a weight that a feedlot really wants. A lot of times by putting them into a grow yard or turning them out on wheat, what have you. But this year it did not work. I tell you what. Most all your backgrounders would have been a lot better off if they had just sat by the fire all winter long, watched football, done anything but buy cattle, and as miserable as it was, as much work as they had to do, and then to lose money, not just wash or not make any money. No, they lost money, and in some cases a lot of it. Most of your backgrounders don't hedge the cattle. They want to hit a home run, or at least have a chance to make pretty good money, and they would have to hedge against the feeder board, which is not as reliable as a hedging tool as what your live cattle board is. And you know, they've really had a rough go of it. Most of them just try to buy the cattle as cheap as they can. Of course, if you want those cattle that are really going to top the market when you get done with them, you're going to give something for those too. But a lot of people buy price and search for the cattle that'll fit their program and try to get them as cheap as they can, keep their input costs down, try to do most all the work themselves, and hope to gain quite a bit of ground. Normally, that's a pretty good investment. That's probably, unless you have a big ranch somewhere that your dad gave you or something, and you can just have a herd of cows out there and raise calves every year. If you're just if you're not that lucky, if you don't have a lot of ground, if you have to lease ground or you have a growing yard or something like that, that is usually the best option to try to make some money in the cattle business, is being a backgrounder. But boy, it did not work this year. And now we've got people kind of worrying about feed costs. Both your backgrounders and of course your feedlots are worrying about feed costs now. Of course, most of your feedlots are bought further out ahead. A lot of them, especially down in the southern plains, have bought up a lot of silage, wheatleage, some kind of a grower that will cut down on their feed costs. But I tell you what, this flooding in the Midwest, and as far as we are behind on getting our crops in, especially corn, it has really jolted this corn market, and we have been pretty lucky as far as that in the cattle business, as feed costs have been really cheap for the last several years, and everybody's kind of gotten used to that. You add some high dollar corn in there, and you don't try to offset it by changing up your ration. A lot of your guys in the northern plains are already hurting now because so many of the ethanol plants shut down over the winter. And those byproducts out of those ethanol plants, those DDGs, they offer a lot of cheap ration right there, and it's kind of hard to get your hands on now. Of course, now you have to go farther to get it, and most of it's freight anyway, but it's not a good deal. But what's frustrating whenever you're watching the market is your grains respond so quickly to fundamentals. And on a normal year, if it rains, next day your corn market's down. If it starts to get dry, next day it's up. If one of those reports come out, a grain report, crop report or something, if it's bullish, it goes up. If it's bearish, it goes down. You can pretty much count on that. And you have a lot of grain merchandisers that are buying and selling grain every day. There's a lot more trade in those commodities than the cattle is. But when you get to your cattle, you know, we had a bullish cattle on feed report. We should have been up the limit to start the week. No, we weren't. We're actually lower. You know, you had such a horrible winter out there. You had guys losing calves, you know, just dropping calves in flooded waters, and then they float down the river, freezing to death. weight loss, everything. Market just keeps going down, down, down. So frustrating. It's not like your grain markets that just respond immediately to fundamental news. In your cattle, it's not as much trade in there. It's more susceptible to being overrun by fund managers, just taking it one way and then another, and then just getting on and riding. And they don't know which end of a cow gets up first. All they do is stare at graphs all day and look for squiggly lines. And and a lot of your commodity brokers, they may know what they're doing, but they're forced to do the same thing too, because that's where the big money's doing. So it's just hard to trade the cattle market just relying on fundamentals to lead you one way or the other. Now, I talked about your feed cost fears going up. This hay deal, they're going to fix it. You remember how short hay got during this last long winter there. And guys were using up their hay stockpiles, you know, just some old bales that were sitting in the fence rows, maybe using them for a windbreak. They are not going to get in that bind again. There's going to be a ton of hay. May not have an opportunity to get dry enough to knock it down and roll it up, but when they do get the opportunity, everybody's going to put up a world of hay. Tell you, down here in the southern plains, for you guys up in the Midwest that don't know, nobody's going to run the combine. We've got wheat hay coming out our ears down here. Every field you go by, and it's good stuff too. It may not have been very tall, but it's making a lot of hay, and there is wheat hay rolled up all over and people hauling it. You get a little bit further up into the Midwest, there's going to be a lot of hay, of course, grass and grass mix hay for the most part, and it's been wet. They haven't had an opportunity to put it down. Some places have. They're going to put up all they can, and they're going to stockpile it. You know, up there in Missouri, I quoted there a few months ago saying that a fescue bale round bale of hay usually worth $30, $35, something like that. Getting $100 for it, you know, at auction, and that's crazy. You cannot afford to feed that stuff, but there's going to be a world of hay put up. That's going to cheapen up your feed costs a little bit on the other side. But you know, talking about those grain markets, don't ever bet against your American farmer. I tell you what, they can make a crop, and we've got all these hybrids now. Even if they can't plant their corn for another 2 weeks, they can still have a bumper crop with that. There's been a whole lot of more crop failures on a dry year than there has been a wet year. So don't get too overzealous on thinking that we've lost all of our opportunity to have a big crop on our row crops, because we can still do it, and there's going to be plenty of moisture, that's for sure. But looking at other things going on, of course, now that everybody's getting excited after Mueller made statements there, they're going to try to impeach the president. And I tell you what the people in the agriculture field want them to do is they want them to get back to work. They want the Congress, the House of Representatives, they want Nancy Pelosi to quit just laying around chewing her cud looking for a reason to impeach the president and pass this new NAFTA deal. That would help a whole lot if we can just put it up for a vote, and it looks like everybody's going to vote for it, but they don't want Trump to have a victory. And that's their worst fear, is Trump having a victory of any kind, even if it helps the American people. And very, very frustrating, but it was kind of a frustrating week so far this week. But let's look at the board for Wednesday. June live cattle futures up 80 cents at 112.35. August was up 7 at 107.85. August feeder cattle were down early, but ended up 50 cents at 142.72, and September was up 35 at 143.02. Your fat cattle trade, we did see a little bit of trade, and it looks like we're going to have a good steady market this week. This time of the year, and the way things are with these heavy supplies of market-ready cattle, we're not really going to be able to sink our teeth in a higher market. If we can just hold it at bay from dropping any more a week here and a week there, and try to keep this thing fairly respectable, well over $1 a pound, live, you know, as we go through this summer. We'd like to hold it close to $1.10, but every week that we can get a steady, that's 1 week closer to getting over this big hump. and it looks like we're going to have a steady market this week already. We might could have gained $1, but we've already got basis jumpers out there, and you can't really blame them because they're scrambling, trying to reach a break even or limit their losses. But I had a few sales in Iowa, mostly steady from 185 to 186 dressed. We had about 2,200 in Nebraska sell steady at 116 live. We had about 3,000 in Kansas, which is a pretty good movement and may have established the market already, at 115, which you could call that a touch higher because there was more 114 in Kansas last week than there was 115. But also Texas even had some sales. 1,500 head in Texas at 115. And we had multiple plants bidding 115 in the Southern Plains, where a week ago it was mainly just one plant. But we can keep a steady market, and that's a good deal whenever things are working against us to kind of hold that market at bay. Box beef cutout values mostly steady, working through here. Let's get into talking about some of our feeder cattle market. I do want to mention my friends up in Canada, and I've got a bunch of them. I've been up there twice in my life, and I've got probably as many good friends up there as I do in a lot of the states. But they are having their Livestock Marketing Association of Canada is having their convention the latter part of this week and over the weekend. They are also going to crown a new Canadian livestock auctioneer champion. Ed Carroll is going to have to give up his seat, but he'll be glad to do that and root on the next guy. But that's going to be at the Thorsby Stockyards in Alberta. And a lot of my good friends up there that I met last year when I went up and spoke at the LMAC, and a good bunch of people, I tell you what, just really good market people. They love the auction way of selling cattle. They love the cattle business. They're just good folks up there, and I wish them all the best and hope they have a good time and have one on me. But let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index late in the day on Wednesday on Cattle Market Central was at $138 even. That was down $3.46 from Tuesday, but your weights were up quite a bit. And I tell you what, these backgrounders have been struggling, trying to show a profit. They're just trying to hold their money together. They have taken some of these cattle to huge weights. They've kept these cattle out on graze out wheat longer than they would have. They've took these cattle to big weights. You looked at OKC West in El Reno, Oklahoma, had about 8,500 head there. The Federal State Market Report called feeder steers $1 to $4 higher and feeder heifers $1 to $2 higher. No comparison on calves because they didn't have too many last week and all the flooding. You look at this Cattle Market Central Market Report, and it doesn't look like it was that much higher. I thought they were a little light on it last week. I thought it was 2 to 4 higher last week. They called it steady to 2 higher. This time I thought it was mostly steady, and then they called it quite a bit higher. But maybe we were looking at different figures, but I don't think so. But look at this Cattle Market Central Market Report out of El Reno on Wednesday. Look at your popular weights of feeder steers. 953 of the 7-weight steers averaged 757 at 134.45. That was down about $1. 1,812 head of 8-weight steers averaged 859 at 125.91 on the weighted average. That was right at steady. And 861 head of 937 pound 9-weight steers on the average there had a weighted average price of 122.55. That'd be steady to $1 lower too, but pretty close to steady there. A lot of cattle moving, a lot of heavy cattle. Like I said, these backgrounders are holding these cattle to big weights. A lot of cattle weighing close to 1,000. They had some cattle weighing over 12. You're seeing that everywhere, big cattle. Noted that on this week's Superior Livestock Auction, they've got a consignment of 3 loads of 1,250 pound cattle, not on the Fed Cattle Exchange, but on the Superior Feeder Cattle Auction. And guys have just kept hanging on and hanging on. They know they don't want to get them fat because they don't have a way to sell them. and they know there's no competition on your fat cattle market. They're just going to glean on to any kind of competition they can hold out on big heavy feeders. Now, it's not going to be a problem on these cattle coming off grass. We've had a lot of 7 and even 8 weight cattle put on grass this spring. That grass is going to be kind of washy because it's so dang wet around. But if it'll warm up and even dry up a little bit here, the early part of this summer, they'll get big gains out of that. A lot of those cattle will be weighing over 1,000 coming off there. That is not a problem because those cattle feed so good. They'll take them to 1,700 pounds, and it'll be no problem. Those cattle will gain 5 and 6 pounds a day, and it won't be a big deal then. Now these cattle are kind of hard to sell. These big 1,000 to 1,200 pound feeder cattle are kind of hard to sell. But you look at your biggest offering at El Reno on Wednesday, there was 354 head of feeder steers weighed 869 at $124, just commodity cattle there. That is a huge slug to sell in one whack. The best sale of feeder steers I saw, Fowler cattle, 73 head of them, weighed 834 and a big load of them, bring $136. That's a pretty impressive market there. Some big cattle even out east, Hardin County Stockyards, Savannah, Tennessee, 55 head of 986 pound steers, bring $122.50. That's your feeder flash for Thursday.